Good afternoon and welcome to the planning meeting here today on the 6th of July. My name is Councillor Gary Marsh. I am the chairman of the planning committee. To my left is my vice chairman, Councillor Kennedy. To my right is Steve King, who's our lead officer today. To his right is Paula, our legal solicitor. To her right is Stephen Malcolm, who's a planning officer. And I'm going to welcome two members from West Sussex County Council for Highways, and that is Stephen Shaw and Katie Carruth. Did I get that right? Oh, that's not bad, was it? And in front of us are the members of the committee who are making the decisions, and in both corners are our committee services who will take the minutes and generally look at all our IT stuff. So I'm going to go with the agenda. So item 1 on the agenda is receive apologies for absence. We have ever full house, so there's none. Item 2 would be to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. I have none. And item 3 is to be agreed by general affirmation that the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 31st of May and the 15th of June are agreed. If you just say agreed, I will sign them all later. Okay, you happy with that? Okay, thank you. And item 4 is to consider any items the chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. Now, when we get called members up of the public to speak, you'll go to that corner microphone over there. You have 2 minutes to put your case to the members. After 90 seconds, which I've been told are going to be indicated on this telephone screens, you'll get the countdown to 90 seconds. And then it will eventually go to 2 minutes where I will ask you to conclude in one sentence. Now, members of the public, we're going to go to item 5. Now, I just want to say this is a planning committee. We're not going to reopen, excuse me, excuse me. Must be something in that water. We're not going to, excuse me, right, you might have to take over in a minute. Right, we're not going to revisit the PINs announcement when we, excuse me, I'm going to have to, just a few seconds, I'm going to have to cough. All right. Independent planning inspector. So I will not want you to open up the pros and cons of this site. We're here to discuss the planning merits of this. Okay? So, Mr. Malcolm, this is yours, Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just start by drawing members' attention to the update sheet, please. I'll just take you through that briefly. First update is to a couple of the paragraphs in the conclusion and the executive summary, just making, deleting reference to policy HK3, and that is just to reflect the assessment that's carried out within the report about the housing mix. Paragraph 3.2, amending the date in recommendation B to the 18th of August. It was originally the 14th of July. That's just to reflect the extension of time that we have with the applicant until that date, just so that the legal agreement, just standard practice, so that the legal agreement has adequate time to be completed post committee. Paragraph 4.1, we've had an additional representation that's summarised, outlining concern about the BNG data presented by the applicant. Paragraph 5.21, we've had additional comments that some of you may have seen online from Wealdon District Council, setting out their position on land for off-site biodiversity net gain within their jurisdiction, making clear that they won't support that particular proposal. I'll come on to that in a moment. And then Appendix A, just looking at modifying some of the conditions, fairly self-explanatory about what should be changed within that, within those So we've got three conditions there, 5, 12 and 33. So I'll take members through the scheme now. So the application, starting with the location plan. The application site is the land to the south of St Stephen's Church, which is located here on Hamsland in the village of Horster-Canes. The site, which is obviously shown in red on the outline there, measures just over 1 hectare, 1.13 hectares that is, and like I said, it's located on the southern side of the village. So the site is located within the built-up area boundary of Horster-Canes, as you'll have seen from the report, and it also falls within the wider High Weald area of outstanding natural beauty. Other constraints on the land include the tree-lined boundaries, the location of the neighbouring residential properties, and the proximity of nearby heritage assets, all of which I'll outline in a bit more detail shortly in the presentation. So this is a slightly closer up image, an aerial image of the site that helps show the existing site and the surrounding land uses in the context. So the black line should make clear, it shows the built-up area boundary, which, as you'll have seen from the report, was extended upon adoption of this allocated site. In terms of the existing use, the site is currently rough grassland, with the applicant stating that it has been used for horse grazing in the past. There's an existing access to the site directly onto Hamsland in this northern portion here, and that's between a residential property and substation to the west and St Stephen's Church itself to the east. It's worth noting that St Stephen's Church closed some time ago, but it does not form part of this application or indeed the site allocation. So there's a number of neighbouring residential properties in the vicinity. Along Hamsland, these include Summerlee, which is the property to the west of the access point, Berghurst Cottage, further to the north, to the east of the church. And then you've got numbers 28 through to number 34 Hamsland, whilst Woodside on Bonfire Lane is to the north, and Milford Place is to the southeast, although they've had a replacement dwelling on this property here, so the actual dwelling has been constructed a little bit further to the southeast, so it's not quite accurate, this aerial image. As members will note from this image as well as from the report, one of the key characteristics of the site are the number of trees around the site perimeter. There are mature hedgerows and trees along both the western, sort of southwestern boundary, as well as the southeastern and eastern boundary here. So the proposed site plan, the application before members today, seeks full planning permission for the development of 30 houses on the site, with these being a mixture of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes. It's important to make clear, as the chairman alluded to a moment ago, that the development of 30 houses in the development plan, sorry, the site is allocated for the development of 30 houses in the development plan by virtue of policy SA 29 of the site allocations document. So the site allocations document was adopted by the council as part of the development plan in June last year. And members will be aware that planning law requires that decisions are made in accordance with the development plan unless material planning considerations indicate otherwise. So of those 30 houses, the applicant is providing a 30% policy compliant level of affordable homes, with that equating to 9 units. The existing access point onto Hamsland will be utilised to create a permanent access to the site, and this will be for both pedestrians and vehicles. The new access road with the footpath on the eastern side will then lead south into the site, into the main part of the site, with 4 detached houses on the left, or the eastern side as you approach. And then the main access road leads east further into the site, where there's a mixture of detached and semi-detached homes located on either side of the main access road. And then there's a block of 6 flats located in a broadly central position here. A further spur road leads to the south, which broadly follows the western boundary as it leads to a further 4 detached houses. Car parking is usually found within individual spaces within the boundary of each plot. A couple of exceptions, that includes garages by the way, a couple of exceptions being the small courtyard parking areas to both the west and the east of the block of flats there, block of 6 flats there. It's worth noting that 65 spaces are proposed in total. So the importance of the site's tree-line boundary is acknowledged by officers, as I mentioned a moment ago, and is reflected in the SA29 policy wording, which is set out in full on the relevant section of it, at para 12.6.3 of the report. This plan before you shows the trees around the site along with their respective root protection areas. The applicant amended their initial submissions to pull some of the properties away from the trees to alleviate future pressure to carry out works to them. But the access road, particularly in this northern part of the site, as you'll have noted from the report, does result in an incursion into those root protection areas. Officers consider that this is essentially an inevitable outcome of the site allocation and the fact that the access has to link up with the public highway onto Hamsland further to the north. Planning officers have, however, sought to minimise the impact of the development on those important trees. Following route inspections carried out by the applicant at the local planning authority's request, the result is that an engineering solution will be required for a large section of the new access road, where conventional permeable construction will not be appropriate in this case. As such, a comprehensive condition, number 5 in Appendix A, is suggested. This will be used to ensure that the detailed design stage will confirm which engineering solution will be utilised to minimise the impact on the boundary trees as far as possible. Related to the tree impact is the ecological impact of the development. In this case, the applicant will need to ensure that the proposed development provides a net gain to biodiversity. This is important because how this is achieved is ultimately down to the developer to satisfy the council on, but the mechanism for securing it is through the legal agreement and use of a planning condition attached to this planning application. So whether the applicant intends to use an off-site location as currently shown as an option but not secured, or through the purchasing of biodiversity credits, or another option altogether, will depend on the developer. But the applicant's submissions on this will be the subject of detailed assessment from our independent ecological consultant. And only when the council is satisfied that the applicant's proposal will result in a biodiversity net gain will the developer be able to commence development. So I mentioned the comments from Wealdon at the outset in the update sheet. They don't really change anything other than for the applicants themselves, as it may be the case that that particular option for the off-site location in Wealdon is not pursued by the applicant. If that is the case, the applicant will have to come up with another net gain solution to the council's satisfaction. So as mentioned a moment ago as well, the existing field access is to be used and upgraded to create the permanent access. These plans before you show the new access with the vehicular displays on the left-hand side and the pedestrian displays down here in the bottom right. It should be highlighted that this is the only location where the site meets the public highway, so is the only realistic option for a location for the vehicular access. So the applicant intends to provide a lay-by on the northern side of Hamsland, which is located up here. This is within the highway boundary. That's for approximately 9 to 10 cars that will have the effect of increasing the width of the road and the site access point itself, whilst also maintaining the level of on-street parking. So dropped curb pedestrian crossings are located on either side of the new access, which is located here and here, as well as slightly further up to the west on Hamsland, both on the north side of Hamsland and on the southern side. There have been extensive submissions by the applicant, the parish and third parties on highways matters throughout the lifetime of this application. These submissions have been robustly assessed by our highways colleagues at West Sussex, who have also visited the site to see the access and the local circumstances for themselves. The conclusion is that there are no technical objections or reasons to refuse the scheme that is deemed to provide a safe and convenient pedestrian and vehicular access, I should say, as per the terms of the site allocation policy SA29. Moving on to this plan, which shows the location of the heritage assets. So I haven't got a red line around the site, just so you get bearings. It's this area here. So the nearby heritage assets are summarised at para 12.4.1 of the report and include Wyatt's, which is a Grade 2 listed 17th century house, approximately 200 metres to the southeast of the site, and the Horster-Canes Conservation Area, which is located slightly to the northeast of the site, and this is indicated by the blue hatching. As set out in the report, the conclusion of the Conservation Officer is that the scheme will not adversely affect the setting of the conservation area. It is found, however, that as a result of the contribution the site as existing makes to the setting of this historic farmstead, a level of less than substantial harm will occur to the setting of Wyatt's. This level of less than substantial harm should be given considerable importance and weight. Para 12.4.16 of the report sets out the balancing exercise that decision makers should conduct as per the requirements of paragraph 202 of the MPPF. And planning officers consider that there will be clear social and economic benefits from the development of 30 homes on an allocated site that includes 9 affordable homes. There would also be public benefits arising during the construction phase of the project and from the operational phase from the additional spending in the local economy from future residents. Officers conclude, therefore, that the public benefits of the proposal outweigh the identified less than substantial harm. Just got a few sample elevations to show members now, starting off with the block of flats, which I mentioned earlier, which is located in a broadly central part of the development. In respect of the design of the dwellings, the applicant has stated that they have had reference even to the High-Wheeled Housing Design Guide, which has informed their proposals. So the features and materials incorporated into the design include half-hipped and cat-slide roofs, simple porch canopies, clay tile roofs, hanging tile facades, brick ground floor elevations with tile hanging or weatherboarding at first floor, as well as tall chimney stacks. The applicant has designed the scheme well to respond to the neighbouring properties and are designed or located far away enough to ensure that unacceptable harm will not occur through overlooking, loss of privacy, or a loss of light. Just got some further sample elevations now of other plots and groups of houses. So plots 1 to 4, plots 21 through to 23, as well as plots 28, 29. So in design terms, members will have noted from the report that no objections have been made by the urban designer, who has recommended that some detailed design issues be secured by condition, with these set out accordingly in Appendix A. There are a number of landscape-related conditions too, as recommended by the specialist consultees. It is acknowledged, of course, that the site is within the AONB, but on the whole is quite a well-contained site immediately adjacent to the settlement. On those landscape grounds, it's worth noting that no objections have been raised by either the High-Wheeled AONB unit or the Council's landscape consultant. The detailed landscape and design conditions will ensure that the impact of the development on the AONB is minimised in a sympathetic manner as far as possible. As such, officers conclude that the natural beauty of the AONB will be preserved. I'm just going to finish now with a few photographs of the site. This first image is not technically a photo, it's just a street view image showing the existing access with the trees. Get the map on the right-hand side there, which this is from the north, so this is along the western boundary. The next photo is taken from just within that access point, looking south into the site, with the back corner of the church building showing on the left, or the eastern side of what will be the access. Photo 3 is an image from within the site looking down towards the far southeastern corner of the site, and probably helps members just appreciate the gentle slope throughout the site. It all sort of falls down towards the southeast. This fourth photograph is from the top of the site looking north, beyond the vegetation, on the boundary towards the Bonfire Lane properties. Photo 5, I've tried to put these together as best as possible. This is a view towards the rear of Burkhurst Cottage on the left-hand side, along with 28 to 34 Hamsland, located more centrally and to the right-hand side. Then the final slide shows the view from the western part of the site, looking back up north towards the site access, and you can also see here the neighbouring property Summerley through the trees on the left-hand side. So in conclusion, planning officers consider that this is a good quality scheme that meets the specific policy requirements of the site allocation, that being SA 29 of the site allocations DPD, as well as the rest of the development plan taken as a whole. Overall, there are not considered to be any sustainable grounds to reject the proposed development on this allocated site, and the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Before we go to the members of the public, I'm going to ask the legal officer to issue a statement, because much has been said about an ownership of the land by the developer. Thank you, Paula. Next one, to the right, that's it.
Concern was originally raised that the owner of the site did not own all of the land over which the access to the site is to be created, and therefore the applicant cannot deliver the access as submitted. The Council and the Highway Authority have investigated this matter fully. It's been established through the provision of ownership plans and adopted highway plans that the access itself is entirely within the ownership of the owner, and the visibility displays that had been created on either side of the access were on highways land. The Council is satisfied that the access is owned by the owner and the displays can be provided over highways land. The Council is satisfied that the applicant can deliver the access and visibility displays. The Council is also satisfied that the correct planning application ownership certificate B has been completed and the correct notices have been provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. All right, I'm going to call Councillor Sarah Webster, from the Chairman of Halstead Keynes Parish Council. I probably pronounced your village horribly wrong there, but... Your 2 minutes will start as soon as you start talking.
Okay. Halstead Keynes Parish Council recognises the need for development in our village, but we cannot support this application. The level of objection from the community is huge, and the proposals go against our neighbourhood plan policies. Your council's conservation officer reports that the level of harm caused the setting of the listed building at Wyatt's is actually greater than was assumed when this site was allocated for development. The recommendation report suggests this harm can be balanced by other benefits, but that is a matter of judgment, and we dispute that the level of benefit attributed to the scheme is sufficient to outweigh the harm inflicted. This application is out of date on sustainability. Since submission in December 2020, we are experiencing an energy crisis and the increasing impacts of climate change. These are material changes, and it is in the public interest to ensure that all new homes are designed and equipped for the future. The condition for a sustainability statement when the development is at slab level is too little, too late. The application fails to comply with HK 11, which states that proposals should be zero carbon ready by design. The recommendation report states that this application fails to comply with the housing mix in HK 3. The applicant has not demonstrated why they cannot meet the 80% figure for 1 and 2 bed homes, which equates to 9 out of 30 houses. West Sussex Highways says that the access for refuse lorries is tight, reversing will be required, and that anything larger than a standard car parked in the lay-by may be considered willful obstruction to be dealt with by calling the police. They also suggest that this application does not have to provide for the required vehicle length because MSDC refuse lorries are shorter, which is not only incorrect, but also fails to recognise refuse lorries may change. How can you approve a planning application that requires reversing, which according to Manual for Streets creates a risk to other street users, or requires refuse workers to call the police every time they can't get round the corner? Does this sound like a plan that provides safe and convenient pedestrian and vehicular access?
Thank you. Very well timed. Thank you. And can I call Paul Fairweather, who's against the application, please? It's already live. Again, your 2 minutes will start as soon as you start to talk.
I live in Hamsland, a huge cul-de-sac that contains 119 homes. That's over a quarter of the village. And my bungalow parallels the western side of the site, separated from it by a line of mature native trees 3 metres away. The barbed wire boundary fence is nailed to them on my side. The building of the substation and then of our home compromised their route plates, yet they continue to thrive using the unaffected area, meaning that this is clearly essential to their health and to their retention as specified by both the inspector and the AONB. This application will cover those route plates with the site access road and run all the site services under this narrow corridor, leading to the risks of compaction, water deprivation and route severance. It will also remove 40% of the tree's canopy for vehicle access. This inevitably leaves stressed, weakened and unstable 17-metre high trees with newly asymmetric crowns close above our property. We fear that this will cause the trees an unsustainable stress and damage, and are afraid that consequently we and our home will be under real physical threat should they fall. Officers have been misled by the applicant's inaccurate drawings to conclude that a safe access is achievable on land within their control. A site visit with a tape measure would have clearly shown that there is a strip of land not in their control that has been used by my predecessors for many years as part of our garden. No one has clear title on that strip, but it does lie beyond the established boundary of the applicant's land. The fence post where the barbed wire boundary reached the highway is clearly visible at the edge of the pavement, but the applicant has ignored this and simply adapted the measurements on their drawings in order to move the boundary westward by 30 centimetres, falsely widening the site's highway frontage. Please protect us by refusing this application.
In 2021, the policy for this site allocation was modified by the inspector to satisfy his concerns about safe and convenient pedestrian access along Hamsland. The application falls well short of this requirement because they have proposed a 1 metre distance back from the curb at the site junction with Hamsland, so pedestrians can see traffic exiting the site. But this is not deliverable because foliage on third-party land to the west of the site entrance cannot be cut beyond the applicant's boundary without agreement. So people pushing metre-long wheelchairs and pushchairs up to this junction cannot see traffic exiting the site unless they push their charges into the road. How is this safe and convenient? In addition, the applicant cannot even deliver the 1 metre distance proposed because the site frontage is actually 30 centimetres narrower than is shown on the applicant's inaccurate drawings, which do not reflect the correct boundary of their own initial survey. How is this safe and convenient? The applicant advises that the development will lead to a 56% increase in traffic along Hamsland, but has never responded to residents' repeatedly raised concerns that this will increase the incidence of head-to-head encounters, leading to more vehicles mounting the pavement. The inspector further modified the site policy to require adequate protection of the existing trees along the site boundary, recognising the importance of these trees to the AONB and the community. The main threat to their survival comes from a cambered access road covering most of their route plates, denying them rainfall, and prolonged use by fully laden construction traffic whose huge weight may be spread but still has to be absorbed by compacting the ground below. We believe on matters of such significance to the inspector that you as a council have a duty to ensure that this policy has been met by the application, which it has not, and is not left to be discharged as a condition. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Melanie Ailey. I'm a technical director with RPS with over 30 years experience in highways and transportation, advising Ryden Homes with respect to their development proposal at Hamsland, Horsted Keynes. The transport statement and supplementary technical information submitted to support this application has been agreed with West Sussex County Council Highways, who have not raised any highway objections, agreeing that the proposed access arrangement is safe and suitable for use by all modes and that there will not be a severe impact. The proposed access to the site has been designed to meet the relevant highway design standards, ensuring that the access has the required level of visibility needed, which has been demonstrated to be within the extent of my client's land ownership or within public highway. It has also been demonstrated that there is sufficient intervisibility between vehicles emerging from the access and pedestrians walking along Hamsland. The access layout has been based on a topographical survey carried out using calibrated surveying equipment and has been tracked using AutoTrack computer software for the largest design vehicles that are likely to use this access on a regular basis. The access and arrangement and tracking has been reviewed by an independent road safety auditor. The development proposal is 30 dwellings, which could see around up to 22 two-way movements in the AM peak hour and 19 two-way in the PM peak hour, which is the worst case would equate to one vehicle travelling along Hamsland every 3 minutes. Hamsland is an existing safe residential cul-de-sac, approximately 5.5 metres wide, with footway provision on both sides, with no recorded incidents over the past 20 years. As with many residential roads, parking does occur along its length. However, there are still sufficient gaps available for 2 vehicles to safely pass. It is considered that increase of 1 vehicle every 3 minutes, as a worst case, would not affect the existing movement along Hamsland. Thank you.
Hope so. Good afternoon, members. The most important consideration for you in this debate is the development plan, as you've already heard. As you know, the site is allocated for 30 dwellings. National planning policy requires that planning should be genuinely plan-led, and planning decisions should therefore be made in accordance with the development plan. The second crucial consideration is your recommendation from your officers. In this case, very unusually, the planning application has been with the council for over 2.5 years. Whilst the details of the scheme, the access, the ecology have been checked and rechecked by your officers, the application has been interrogated thoroughly and found to be acceptable. And it's not just your officers that believe that to be the case, it's the statutory consultees. The urban designer raises no objection, the conservation officer the same, the landscape consultant, ecology consultant, tree officer says improvements have been made and therefore I have no objection. Housing officer, drainage officer, West Sussex County Council Highways, Southern Water, Wealdon District Council in principle, and Natural England all raised no objection to this scheme. Overall, the character and appearance of the High Weald AONB will be preserved. The proposal will not result in unacceptable harm to any neighbouring residential amenity. The proposal has safe and convenient pedestrian and vehicular access, as confirmed by the Highway Authority, and therefore compliant with site-specific SA29 policy modification MM20. There would be clear social and economic benefits from the development of 30 houses on the site, allocated for residential development, and particularly inclusion of 9 affordable homes. I trust that given the overwhelming support for the policy and the endorsement by all professional officers and consultees, that you will support this application. Thank you.
Right, members, we've got quite a complicated application in front of you. You haven't heard me say this before, but I'm only going to take questions of what's actually in the report, not what's not in the report. It's only in the report. So, as is the one, I'm going to call the ward councillor. If you wish to speak first, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. This application, as has been pointed out, has been in the hands of the council for 30 months. And there's been a fair amount of contortions from officers to come up with what I regard as almost fudges. And I'll go into those particular areas in a minute. The site allocation DPD was made by the council in June 2022, and I played no part in that. In that document, never had a chance to comment on it. So throughout, I've not made any comments one way or the other. I've been waiting for this report to make my decision. And since the officer's report was published, I've been looking at it very carefully. And the material modification number 20 at the SPD review for safe and convenient pedestrian and vehicle access along Hamsland, I still don't think it's achieved, and I feel sure that the residents of Horsted Canes are going to be disappointed and with this development if it goes ahead in this form, particularly with the access. Now, the point about the access, normally it's a very narrow access, and normally when you get a development behind existing dwellings, there's problems with the access, and usually it's a hard case, i.e. there's buildings on both sides, or something has to be acquired and demolished. In this case, we've got a stand of trees down the western boundary, and on the eastern boundary we've got the St Stephen's Church, which has been deconsecrated and was put up for sale, and a small amount of that land would enable the access to be wide enough to not damage the root protection areas. I've had endless documents sent to me over the period, and one that let's have a look, just bear with me. Yeah, the one that I draw particular evidence from is the protection of these trees, not just the root protection areas, which are covered by, or should be covered by, BS 5837, and but the actual engineering works over them. In one case, is 58% of the root protection area, and the residents, I don't know who they were, but they ended up taking a 5.4 metre staff and measuring these trees. Now, the trees at the entrance, T2 and etc. going in, they end up with the lower boughs being removed to within a metre of the trunk of the tree, completely unstabilising the tree, in order to give you 5 metres of clearance. So not only are the root protection areas influenced, but also the trees themselves are going to be damaged, as already mentioned. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the highways are satisfied, but nevertheless, a study by Pelham, Richard Pelham Associates, demonstrated that It's very, very tight indeed for vehicles turning into and out of the area. And then we've got while this has been going on over the last 30 months, Horsted Keynes Parish Council have made their neighbourhood plan, and they've, in that neighbourhood plan, they've accepted that if this goes ahead, this would provide their needs together with SA 28, which is the police house development that's on, also in hand. That would provide their total requirements. So they haven't, you know, they're not against this. But they've had, in order to get the neighbourhood plan through, they've had to accept that that is the complete needs of Horsted Keynes in terms of sustainability. You know, it is an out-of-the-way village with a 1-hour bus service. Excuse me, just let me have a little drink. Thank you. And of course, it's taken 7 years to get that neighbourhood plan. It's the last one in the district. It's taken 7 years to get it made. And of course, now it's made, do we find that any of the conditions in that neighbourhood plan have been taken into account? And I think the answer to that is almost no, as you heard from the chairman of the parish council, Councillor Webster. So for me, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for the residents at the moment. There are nearly 400 representations. It doesn't work. It doesn't work on the biodiversity mitigation either. And another representation I got this morning from Helena Griffiths regarding the biodiversity assessment and the metrics that have been used. It might be that, and there might be a question here, whether this is now relevant in view of the fact that East Sussex and Wealden are not prepared to agree to a Section 106 for the alternative for the strategic replacement site. But you know, in this, the strategic significance metric is given as low for every one of the considerations, and she's pointed out, as I say, it was only drawn to my attention this morning. So here we are after all this time, we're still arguing about metrics. And maybe you've mentioned I can't ask questions, but about anything that's not been presented. But what about this Constance Wood field next door? I mean,
It's nothing to do with this application, Councillor Brown.
I thought you might say that. So I think I've said enough there. I think you've got my drift. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Just a factual point, it was only Wealden District Council, not East Sussex. Do you wish to come back on anything like that, Stuart?
Yeah, it'd be quite useful. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah.
Love me to.
And if you want to include your colleagues.
I'll bring them in.
I thought you might.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Brown, for your comments. Yeah, I mean, you've quite rightly picked up on some of the key issues that form part of the fundamental assessment of this application. I'll come on to the access point in a moment and bring in the colleagues from West Sussex. You did mention about the proximity of the trees and the church to the access. I know you mentioned about extending any land, but I think, as the chairman said at the start, we've got to make an assessment based on the application before us, and that is the application site within the red line. Doesn't include any additional land outside that. We've got to make an assessment as to whether this access is safe based on the submitted plans. We can't look at things that aren't before us that involve the potential extending of the site into the church land. On the broader point about the tree impact, you're quite right about the root protection areas. I mean, that's a point that's accepted by our tree officer. And I think if I could draw members' attention specifically, please, to condition 5. I'm not sure that's in Appendix A. I'm not sure if you've got numbered pages, but it's condition number 5 in Appendix A.
It's page 74.
That's page 74, isn't it? If you've got hard copies. So I think it's worth highlighting that this is a very detailed condition that goes above and beyond what the normal expectation would be on a landscaping condition where it seeks tree protection measures. You know, it goes into details about the installation, excavation of service trenches, for example. That isn't something that we would normally put in a planning condition, but is in this case, along with what will be the crucial point about the applicant will need to demonstrate with an engineering solution what the best approach will be to ensure that the root protection areas of those trees along that sort of 47-metre area where there's an incursion is going to minimise the impact of the development as far as possible. I'm not an engineer myself, clearly, but the options, you do tend to have various engineering solutions to issues like this. So I'm sure an expert will come up with a potential solution. Whatever that solution is will be robustly assessed by our tree officer to establish whether that's a suitable method to discharge the condition as and when those details are submitted. In terms of the impact on the tree canopy, again, it's a good point, but one really that is an inevitable consequence of the access having to be in this location. You know, the trees do play an important visual role in you know, adding to the character of the site and the surrounding area. There's no doubt that we as officers want to see them retained as best as we can as part of this comprehensive development. I think we've got to accept that there will be some works to be carried out to those trees. We'll have to seek details within the conditions as to what those works are, but they'll need to be signed off and agreed with the tree officer as part of the development. You mentioned the biodiversity and the metrics. It's worth saying it's set out in the report, but obviously our independent ecological consultant, Place Services, have assessed the submissions and not raised any objections based on what's been submitted today. The whole biodiversity net gain issue, that's something that the applicant will need to address at a later stage, and then that will be subject to the input of our ecological consultant as and when that is submitted as well. I think that's probably all I need to say, Chairman, but if I could bring in my colleagues from West Sussex Highways just to pick up.
It's probably the best time to do that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. So in relation to the site access arrangements, I think the important things to note are that there has been a stage 1 road safety audit undertaken. That is independent of the design team. So the developer who has commissioned consultants to design the access, the independent audit will have done separately from that design team. So I think that's important to note. As part of that, there were 2 problems raised within the audit. Officers have worked closely with the developer to address those 2 issues, and they have both been satisfactorily addressed. And the auditor has stated that they are no longer problems because they've been addressed. So there are no outstanding safety issues as part of the stage 1 audit. Subject to being approved and planning permission being granted, West Sussex will obviously work with the developer and do subsequent stage road safety audits to ensure that safety is considered to the highest priority through all stages of the design process. In terms of the visibility from the access, the applicant's undertaken a survey on Hamsland itself to understand the vehicle speeds, and that has helped inform the visibility displays that are required from the access arrangements. And as part of our review of the access, we feel, and our view and recommendation is that the access is designed in accordance with Manual for Streets guidance, which is the relevant guidance within this location. So I think officers are comfortable that the access is designed appropriately and relevant with the relevant guidance, and there's no reason that there would be unwarranted safety concerns as a result of the design. I think the other thing to note is that from our check of the accident records, there's no existing accidents. We've checked for a 5-year period. There's no existing accidents on Hamsland within the vicinity of the site. And based on the design, we don't think that there would be any exacerbation of any likely accidents in that location. In terms of pedestrian access, I think important things to note are that there have been improvements, and we feel that there's an appropriate crossing point for pedestrians, and that there's a connection into the existing pedestrian network from the site that provides a safe and convenient access for pedestrians into the development site. And also, as part of one of the requirements of SA29, the applicant is clearly setting back the lay-by, which you can see on the screens now. So they're setting back and creating the parking lay-by in the vicinity of the access, which will be a benefit to the existing situation on Hamsland itself, with the slightly wider carriageway provided and the lay-by inset into the footway there on the northern side of the screen there. So we feel there are benefits to the existing situation being created by this proposed development.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, before I go to Councillor Henwood, I'm just going to guide the members of the public who are watching. You've heard SA29, you've heard site allocations. This was a document that was we as a district council had to provide to maintain our 5-year land supply. And this is one of those sites that included into that document. I have one in my ward, you know, the one in Ardenney, and now this is the one up in Horsted Keynes, and there are spread across the whole of the district. Some are bigger than others. So Councillor Henwood, just sort of remind everybody that this is part of the, you know, if this goes through, it's the 5-year land supply. Councillor Henwood.
Thank you. Could you go back to the diagram and show me where the affordable housing will be, please?
So located centrally within the block of flats, and these 3 houses immediately to the north.
Okay, thank you. So I'm dismayed. I'm looking at the report, and I'm looking at page 26. 12.1, under the main issues that need to be considered, I feel like in this day and age, one of those main issues should be renewable energy. There's nothing on that list. Everybody got it? It was 12.1. Nothing to do with renewable energy, which I feel like we just need to be addressing every time we look at one of these applications. So I presume, is it too soon to be questioning, will there be renewable energy in this scheme? Is it too soon?
Just a second, let the officer answer that one.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Does it fall under other issues, Stuart?
So I think, could I just address the points more generally about sustainability, if I may? Yeah. And I think if I could draw members' attention to paragraph 12.125. So there's not a specific renewable energy assessment section, but there is a sustainability assessment section. That's where we'd normally pick up that particular issue. So 12.125 basically acknowledges that the submitted sustainability statement that the applicant provided with the application as originally submitted is, shall we say, a little lightweight on sort of firm commitments about what they intend to do in order to satisfy us on ensuring a policy compliant level of development in respect of sustainability, renewables, etc. Which is why we've used a further condition to request another sustainability statement, essentially setting out precisely what the applicant will be intending to do. And I think, along with that condition, I think if the committee want to suggest through an informative what they might like to see as part of that condition, then we can do that, and that's something the applicant can take away. So I'm in the committee's hands there if you want to suggest anything as just as an informative that we can direct to the applicant's attention. I'm happy to do that. Thanks, John.
In your hands, Councillor Henwood. What would you like to see?
Well, an informative, well, first of all, Chairman, I would like to see every time we have a planning application coming up that we list as an important need to be considered renewable energy. I mean, this is list of how many is 1, 2, 3 on page what I'm referring to. I think it should be standard policy, Chairman, that we always put that. It's very important. That's the first point I'd like to make.
Okay, that will be taken on board.
Thank you very much. Now, perhaps an informative, I would have to depend upon you as chairman to
Solar
design.
panels?
I beg your pardon?
Solar panels?
Photovoltaics.
Yeah.
Photovoltaics.
Yeah.
And the orientation has to be sufficient to allow maximum production.
Bearing in mind,
obviously.
we're not going to redesign the development.
But we can suggest as an informative, it would be advisable or whatever, that we would appreciate seeing photovoltaics on appropriate roofs. Okay, so another point I wanted to point out, which is on page 60, which is this, we've been talking about let me just find page 60, the net gain in biodiversity. So where's page 60? And I was quite astounded, if I can find page 60. Yeah, 12.7.13, that they will actually allot, this is a greenfield site, of course, greenfield site, not brownfield, that they will equate to 58.43% decrease loss of habitat units. So I'm always sort of confused. So if you read that, where I'm at, 12.7.13, it therefore says the proposals, they're going to put a few hedgerow units in, and that will show an increase of 11.73, whatever. We've stated, the planning officer said, I think, that at a later stage, we would address, am I correct in saying at a later stage, we will address the biodiversity net gain? And
When the Section 106 agreement is signed, it will include the BNG in it. Perhaps you'll explain it better than I will.
Yeah, just briefly, Chairman. I mean, so the legal agreement will, and a condition basically through this plan application secures the mechanism for the delivery of biodiversity net gain. So it's then, so we're not actually looking at the specifics. So it's a bit confusing probably, I'm afraid, because the applicant at the moment has put on the table essentially an off-site location in Wealdon District. But ultimately, the applicant will have to satisfy the council through the discharge of obligations in the legal agreement that they are going to provide biodiversity net gain and meet the terms of biodiversity net gain. That will be assessed by our ecologist, and that will be based on the point you made a moment ago, Councillor Henwood, about the loss. So that's the loss on site. So what they need to do is establish what the impact is on site before they then look at offsetting that, whether it's through on-site methods, off-site methods, or through the purchasing or otherwise of biodiversity credits. So there's various options that the applicant will have to demonstrate that they can meet biodiversity net gain, but it's very much a case of the ball is in the applicant's court on that. They'll need to demonstrate to us that they've done that, but the method for securing that is through the legal agreement that's going to be attached to this planning permission. Thanks, Sean.
Chairman, it's interesting because I didn't realise there would be any legal obligation until November 2023.
No, because this was a allocated site under the site allocations document. If you remember at our training session, they did say, and I specifically asked that question of the consultant, because it's in our, we've got it today, and it was in the site allocations document, they had to do it.
Okay, that's good news.
That's why I asked it.
That's good news. Well done, Chairman. But I also would like to express a terrific concern over the mature trees, because we know how valuable they are in biodiversity and ecology and not easily replaced. And we need to be thinking about this when we're talking about our climate and how relevant they are. Thank you, Chairman.
That's fine. I'm glad that you left it at that one. But if you go back to page 69, and the formative, as the plan officer said, you know, we'll go with what you've suggested, but the building regulations can be beefed up for the energy reduction as well. And obviously, we're future-proof electric vehicle charging points as well. If they don't have it on every building, we'll make sure that that's future-proofed.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, just on the electric charging, the applicant will need to meet building regulations, and they'll come, EV charging points will come through that. It's likely we'll get details of EV charging points through the air quality condition anyway, but primarily it will be delivered through the meeting of building regulations.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's where you get most of the energy reduction. Councillor Sweatman, you've been patient.
Well, thank you, Chairman. You've just actually answered my question, because I was going to ask the case officer perhaps to explain how the building regulations do fit in, and whether the developers, there's a time limit, I think, is still in place as to what they have to do to meet the current or the future regulations. Yeah, that's the only question at the moment, Chairman,
Okay.
I wanted to ask, but I think you've answered it.
Sorry about that. Right, nobody else wishes to speak. So, could we put up on the screen the recommendation? I won't read it all out, but suffice to say, with subject to the change, which is up on the screen, we will approve it if members will do it, and if they haven't completed the section 106 by the planned obligation by the 18th of August of this year, it will be refused, and no doubt I will be informed of that anyway as chairman, and my vice chairman will be informed of that. Can I have a proposer for the application? Councillor Sweatman, can I have a seconder? Councillor Hitchcock. The proposal is to approve this application, so could you vote as accorded, as we were told, green if you approve it, red if you don't, and yellow if you abstain. I've got 2 people. That's it. They're all here. Could we have up on the, Aidan, if you can put it up on the... Right, it's 10 in approving it, 1 refusing it, 1 abstain, so this has been approved. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Right, this is item 6, DM 213875, land at Askins Wood, Crescent, Hayward Heath. And this one's yours, Joseph. And it's on pages 127.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to take members to the update sheet. The first amendment is the change to the figures for the community building has been corrected to 5,928. And the second change is paragraph 13.3 has been amended to read, if permitted, the local planning authority would receive a new homes bonus for the proposed units. The application seeks plan permission for 2 buildings to provide 2 one-bedroom apartments, 6 two-bedroom apartments and 2 three-bedroom apartments, forming a total of 10 units with associated parking, cycle parking, refuge store and a woodland management plan. The application site is identified by the red line on the location and block plan as shown. The application site is designated within the Mid Sussex District Plan as being within the built-up area boundaries, and the woodland on the western part of the site is designated as ancient woodland and is subject to a group TPO. The application site is located, where the buildings will go is located to the south of Larchwood, 1 to 4 Askins Wood Crescent, with Bowden Way to the south and a car park to the eastern part of the site. Being within the built-up area boundaries of Hayward Heath, the site is considered to be within a sustainable location. The principle of new housing within this location are considered to comply with policy DP4 and DP6 of the district plan, policy H8 of the neighbourhood plan, which is reflective of the aims of the national planning policy framework. And as such, the principle of this development is considered to be in accordance with the development plan. The proposed site plan here shows that the access for the site is to come off the existing access which serves the existing residential dwellings within this area. It will provide parking for 3 car parking spaces to the front of the 2 buildings, while the additional 10 spaces are provided on the existing green roundabout area. Although this is below the West Sussex car parking standards, due to the fact that it is within a sustainable location, there's also comprehensive parking restrictions within the wider locality. West Sussex have raised no objection to this proposal, and it's considered that future occupiers would be aware of the level of parking when looking at moving into this potential development. One of the main considerations on this is this ancient woodland, which is shown. We can see the buffer zone shown. Obviously, some of this access is already within that area, but the proposed access there is a small section which will come into this buffer zone. However, as part of this proposal, the proposal is seeking to remove an area of hard standing from within the ancient woodland buffer zone, so there would be a net decrease in hard standing within the ancient woodland buffer. In addition, the proposal is seeking to provide a woodland management plan which will seek to remove any invasive and non-native species from the woodland. There will be a hedgerow created with a post and rail fence around the wooded area, and there will also be long-term enhancements secured by a landscape and ecological management plan which we have as a condition. Due to the distances between the dwellings to the north and the dwellings to the south with screen in between, it is also not considered to cause significant harm in terms of overlooking, loss of privacy, a reduction in sunlight and daylight, and a loss of outlook. Here we can see the proposed elevations for plot 1 and 2. This is the first unit as you come in from the access. The design approach is considered to be in keeping with the design and the materials used within the more modern Bowden Way development. Within the locality, there is a mixture of 2- and 3-storey dwellings, and there's also a mixture of converted hospital buildings and the more newer build development of Bowden Way. As such, in addition, there's considered to be adequate spacing around the buildings, and as such, the proposal is considered to be of an appropriate design, size and scale. For context, we have the floor plans, so we have the ground floor, first floor and second floor plans. Each unit is provided with a balcony area, and all the units will meet the National Dwelling Space Standards. And we have a similar design for plots 6 to 10 on the second building. And again, just for context, is the floor plan is fairly similar to the previous. This next slide shows the site sections along. So obviously we can see that the land does dip from the Larchwood or 1 to 4 Askins Wood Crescent, and is of a slightly lower height due to the change in levels, while it is slightly higher than the properties on Bowden Way, which again, as the land levels drop down. Due to the separation distance, it's not considered because of the separation distance, it's not considered that this increase in height would have a significant impact on the neighbouring amenities. And just for reference, this is the proposed cycle store first, and we also have the bin and recycle store proposed as part of this development. And we have some photos of the site, surrounding site. So the first photo here is from Bowden Way looking towards the development site. You can see we have an established tree screening at the moment, and with the Larchwood 1 to 4 Askins Woods Crescent beyond. And the second photo is from down around the corner, looking sort of northwest towards the development site. Again, just to see the top of Larchwood. This next photo is from within from the top of the turning circle that is at present. We can see obviously the roundabout, and we can also aware that there is parking within the ancient woodland buffer zone, but obviously as part of the proposal to improve the woodland, this will be fenced off to ensure that there is no encroachment into this area. In addition, this tarmac area is to be replaced with permeable block paving. And we have the final two photos. Again, it's just looking along the woodland edge at the moment, which is not defined by anything other than just the planting that's there at present. Obviously, this will provide a more structured barrier to this woodland. And the final photo, obviously, is just to highlight that there is a mix of 2- and 3-storey dwellings within this area, which does form sort of part of the existing character. The proposal will be providing 10 units within the built-up area boundaries of Haywards Heath, within a sustainable location, at a time when there is a need for the local authority to significantly boost the supply of housing. The proposal is considered to be of an appropriate design, size and scale, which is appropriate to the locality, and the resulting relationships are not considered to cause harm to neighbouring amenities. The proposal was also considered acceptable in relation to drainage, dwelling space standards, land contamination, and the proposal includes a scheme for the management of the ancient woodland, resulting in a net reduction in hard standing within that buffer zone. On balance, the benefits of this proposal are considered to outweigh the impact on the trees and the lower parking provision, and is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Can you explain, because the members have probably looked at the report, well, I hope they have, regarding it did have a planning permission, but that was never issued because of a failure to secure the Section 106 agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So in 2012, there was a previous consent on this site. I say consent, there was a previous application on this site which went to committee and was recommended for approval, but due to issues in relation to the 106 contributions, the 106 agreement was never signed, and as such, that decision was never formally issued.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to call Nigel Baxter, please, who's speaking against the application. Mr. Baxter, if you'd like to come to where you're being indicated to speak. As soon as you start to speak, your 2 minutes will...
Okay. I'm Nigel Baxter. I'm the chairman of Askins Wood Residents Association. I'm here representing the 13 households of the association in their strong objection to this development. I would like to tell the committee how saddened and disappointed we are as a community by the proposed development and its detrimental impact on our access and enjoyment of the green space that surrounds our homes. For more than 10 years, the residents have benefited from the proximity of the ancient woodland and the landscaped roundabout. We enjoy community events here, such as our Jubilee Party, children playing safely on the roundabout, and many of us exercising in front of our own homes. The planning permission for the 10 houses in 2013 did not proceed, I thought due to lapse of time, but you've explained it was Section 106. However, this scheme could not be built today due to the redefining of the ancient woodland boundary. The new site area is now far smaller than the original 2013 proposals. The proposed development overlooks residents' kitchens and bedrooms, causing loss of light and privacy. Whilst we appreciate the need for more homes in this area, these 2 blocks of flats dwarf the surrounding homes. There will not be enough parking for the new residents, and direct access to the properties will only be direct access to property will only be achievable on foot. The developer's plan is to turn the green space into a car park and to remove a beautiful ancient pine tree under the premises of disease. This tree is flourishing with new cones and needles and has withstood heat waves, drought, storms and floods. We've been given to understand that it is government policy to preserve and protect green spaces for future generations and not to destroy them forever. We ask the committee to reject planning permission for this development so that a better solution can be found for the use of the land behind us. Please help us to preserve this important piece of woodland and safeguard the well-being of the community and the natural environment. We urge the committee to visit the site before they make their decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody has visited the site
Yeah.
prior to today.
Okay.
I'd like to think they have. I'd like to call Claire Lander. She's speaking in support of the application.
Chairman and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this application. The proposal is the product of discussions with planning officers which have been ongoing since 2020. The applicant has worked with the council and the proposal has evolved in direct response to officer comments, both at pre-application stage and throughout the planning application. The previous resolution to grant 10 houses means that the principle of development has already been established. This is confirmed in the officer's report. The site is within the urban area in a Category 1 settlement, where the majority of the district's housing should be focused. The site is classified as brownfield, previously developed land. It is in a sustainable location close to shops, services and bus stops. 13 all-electric vehicle parking spaces are provided. In relation to the loss of a Category B tree, this is not a tree of high landscape or arboricultural value. The incursion into RPAs of 3 trees are extremely minimal and would not cause long-term harm to those trees. The main arboricultural features of the site are retained and new planting is proposed. The ancient woodland would be protected. The proposal would result in a net decrease of almost 50 square metres of hard surfacing within the buffer zone, an improvement on the current position. The scheme includes a regenerative woodland management plan to maintain and enhance the woodland quality. This benefit would not come about without the proposal. There are no statutory objections from consultees, and finally, in response to the objection, the land is private land, not community-owned land. It's therefore respectfully requested that members support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call the local board councillor Ms Councillor Clark, just to remind any members of the public, Councillor Clark will not be timed, as ward councillors are not timed, but he knows he will not speak forever and a day.
And I'll try not to waffle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Several things have already been said, but I'm going to probably go over one or two of those things because there are one or two facts and a bit of the history of the site as well. And also we've had, which you've probably read, there's been over 61 letters of objection, including the Town Council, and the Town Council did recognise that the original application had the principle for development. But, which the Chairman has explained about the 106 money, there was also another issue. At that time, the Mid Sussex District Council did not have a 5-year land supply, and so that put pressure on these sites. So I want that just to remember that we've now got a 5-year land supply, and I think this development, as the resident said, is going to do more damage there, but I'll move on to that. Going back to the objections, which I'm sure you've read, there were three in there that I picked up that I wanted to disagree with the developers and agree with the residents. I'll go to the parking first. Some of those residents that were worried about the parking are slightly further afield. There's people in Below Way. There are a Twitton that backs onto this group of houses, and their parking is at the back. If we lose this parking, they will not have any parking. So that parking will be pushed into Colwell Road. Colwell Road have also objected to this because they are terraced houses. So they are now worried about their parking. So I think to say I think that is a big point. There is not enough parking there. And I wouldn't want to see more parking because it would do more damage to the ancient woodland. The other issue is on the light. I think this development is wrapping round the houses that are already there at Anscombe Crescent. They actually it's like a back garden development and a side development. And it is a big development, and I think it will affect their light. I've been there and looked at the site. I know I don't want to fall out with the officers because he's saying the light's okay. But it wraps around, and I feel that that will affect their light. And he has mentioned the topography, is that the right word? Bowden Way, and I've been again down today, I've often gone down there, but I went down today just to make sure my facts were right, and that development will look into Bowden Way, and it's not as if it's a 3-storey, it's going to look like a 4 or 5-storey now, looking into Bowden Way. So it's going to overlook them. So it's a 3-storey site. And the history of the site, Anscombe Wood. Well, we all know that there's an Anscombe Wood on the other side of the bypass. It was one wood. We lost a lot of the wood, the ancient woodland, because the bypass had to come through. I call it the inner ring road now, but it's the bypass came in. A lot of work's been done on the south side, but this is part of the same wood. Now, where the flats are going to be developed, that is not quite ancient woodland, but it's a green and corridor, and it runs the north side, which you can't see on that picture, the north side of Bowden Way, and then turns right at the west side of the St Francis playing fields, where there's a valley, streams, and it goes down, and ancient woodland, it joins there and goes to a tunnel, which then links to Anscombe Wood, the other side. It's a back tunnel, it's a wildlife tunnel, and that stretch behind those houses might look a bit wild. I've been there, stinging nettles and stuff, they've got lovely butterflies in there. It's a wildlife corridor, and that will be destroying the wildlife corridor. We are trying to save green spaces when we haven't got the luxury of a green circle like Burgess Hill that actually developed, so we're very concerned about our green corridors. We've got more houses coming. We've got at Hurst Farm, so we need to protect our green corridors. And I'm looking at the committee now, and it is a green corridor. I've walked it, I've been there and seen it. So I mean, I could go on about a lot of the other complaints, but you've read those, and I just want to go on that side. And you know, the town council objected to it. And that site also, there's been 5 or 6 sites there developed piecemeal because people went bust, developments fell down, and there's another development just near there called Linden House. It's a falling down old nurses' home. For 10 years as a councillor, I've been trying to get that developed. That's a brownfield site. That should be developed, not this. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Very the heart. I'm just going to, before we start the debate, and I shall go to you, Councillor Kenny, first, because you're the ward councillor. Just Councillor Clark highlighted that when we gave planning permission for this, and I put my hands up, I was not actually on that planning committee. Thank God for that. But we didn't have a 5-year land supply, and it was presumption in the favour of approval. And if we refused it, it would have gone to appeal, and we would possibly have had costs awarded against us. But there is a balance here to be had. There are fewer parking spaces that the county council don't like. The impact on the trees. So there's the 2 main reasons. But you've also got to weigh up 10 smaller units. So it is one of those balancing cases which we get the choice. Don't get that choice very often, a balanced case, but it can be either way. Councillor Kenny, I shall not want to steal your thunder, so away you go.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and the subject of balance will be at the heart of everything that I have to say. Like a good committee member, I'm very, very mindful of the need for housing in Mid Sussex, and we've all got a responsibility wherever we can to find those opportunities, and that's at the forefront of my mind always. But I think it's balance and judgment in these cases, looking for, first of all, going with conversations that I've had with residents and my own look at the site. I would tend to think that under both all of DP26, E9 in the neighbourhood plan and H8, all of those policies, you could construe that the scale of the development leading to the kind of overlooking that we've had explained to us is just, if you like, out of balance with the site. And I think that's the main issue that I would put forward. Not that there should be no development ever on this site. I'm not going quite as far as some of the speakers, but I would say that the proposal that we've got in front of us really does not do enough to take care of the amenity of all the residents on Bowden Way and on Anscombe Drive who have made their positions very clear, and that we should take those things into account. Obviously, the town council are also against it. So these factors, as the chairman has pointed out, cause a balance. What's the right thing to do here? My own view is that if there were an alternative proposal that was less greedy of space and environment, that's something that could be acceptable in this area. And I say that precisely to address the issue of we're all responsible for trying to increase housing in the area. But I think that this is a matter of scale, and like everyone else, I fully respect the planning officer's judgment. I respectfully have a different judgment about how it affects the other residents. So, for example, the positioning of the blocks is that in some of the cases, they do fall below, on corners and edges, fall below the minimums. In other areas, other aspects, it's larger. The net effect, though, if you're standing on Bowden Way, is absolutely clear. As was pointed out, it's a really, really big difference. And something that hasn't really come out in the diagrams that we've seen is what those perspectives would be like. There's obviously the whole issue of the ancient woodland and the amenity that the Housing Association chairman put forward that is currently gained by the residents from the roundabout in its current form. Recognise that there are opportunities for improvement of the way that the ancient woodland is maintained. Those opportunities are there right now for the owner. Those things could be happening today. They're not, necessarily part of any development programme. And obviously we have the objections of the tree protection officer. So to sum up my feelings as I currently see them, as I'm listening to this debate, is that I feel as though this particular proposal is out of scale with the amount of space in the environment that there is for it. I understand that will have implications for the applicant, but I think a rethink for a different exploitation of the site that could still provide some housing would be an excellent thing to do, and that's the balance that I'm thinking of as I go into this vote.
Thank you, Councillor Kearney. When I visited the site, I was actually struck how tranquil it looked, and I was dragged down by your fellow board councillors to come down and see this. So I would have gone anyway, but I did, and I went with quite an open mind, thinking, well, it's housing, we need the housing, and I thought, this is actually a little bit of an oasis here amongst that area, and unfortunately we got the splitting of Askins Wood because of the bypass, and we did lose a lot of ancient woodland because of it, and I wouldn't want to see anything more about it. Does anybody else wish to speak? Because Councillor Hitchcock, thank God for that.
I'm going to go with Councillor Kenny. If you look at that site plan up there, over 50% of it is contained as ancient woodland, and the rest of it is too small, in my view, for the size of development that's going to go on it. That, coupled with the fact that they can't provide enough car parking, nails it down for me. I think car parking in that area, which I did go and visit yesterday, is limited. The streets are quite narrow. The comment about the terraced houses is very appropriate. They have no off-road parking, some of them. I think the parking situation will get worse. And in my view, if there is a site down the road which is developable, they should look at it.
Yeah, we've been trying for ages, Councillor Hitchcock, for that one, believe me. Councillor Henwood.
Yes, I would support the ward councillors. It is overbearing for the size. It also would be detrimental to the ancient woodland, detrimental to the nearby neighbourhood, and we need to preserve as much open space, as much tranquility, as much wildlife corridors that we still have in this Mid Sussex. So yes, that's my feeling. Thank you.
Yeah. I just ask. Yeah, of course you can, Councillor. Am I Vice Chairman?
It strikes me, Councillor Kenny's points echoed by Councillor Henwood, something that struck me. For me, the building just seemed to be too high for the location. But I was also interested to hear what Councillor Clark said about the corridor. And I wondered with the officer if Joseph could say anything about that, because the description that we were given by Councillor Clark was effectively that it's been dammed off, and the corridor that was there, or that is there now, is going to be closed completely. Has that been taken into account?
So we have consulted quite extensively with our ecology consultants on this, and they have asked for a number of surveys which the applicant has provided. Taking on their expert advice, they're not raising an objection to this proposal as it's set out. So they would have considered the ecology as a matter. They're the experts, and they've given the opinion that this scheme, subject to a number of detailed conditions, is considered acceptable and have not raised an objection to this proposal.
I'll come back, unless members
I'm going to say something. You're not going to like it.
Yeah.
I'm actually in favour of Councillor Kenny's. I think you could get something on this site. And I just think it's too high, too big, too large, and too domineering. Those who've known me for donkey's years, it's the quart into the pint pot game. And this is where I think we're at on this one. I'm not against this site being developed. I'm not against flats being put on this. I just don't think what we've got in front of us today is the right application. And I think we have a speaker for it, and I think hopefully she will take on board, if it goes against a refusal, that they will take on board. Because I think if you did shrink the thing down, you would have the right amount of parking spaces, you would protect the green open spaces, and they may not need to touch that tree. Because I actually agreed, I thought the tree was pretty good, as it happens. And I was actually struck how it's important we keep these green open spaces. And that's my two penneth, and now I'm going to get told off by the officer. Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to run through some of the points that have been flagged up and raised by members and speakers. I think at the outset it's probably important to reiterate that opposition to a planning application in itself isn't a reason to resist a planning application. It's always got to be on sound planning ground. So I think members are well aware of that, but I think it's worth pointing that out. The next point was the mention of another site, Dindon House, as was set out on the previous application. It applies equally to this one. We're only looking at what's before us. So it's the acceptability of this proposal being put forward by the applicants, not what may or may not be achievable elsewhere in the vicinity. So we've just got to solely focus on what we've got in front of us here. I think Joseph's mentioned and gone through the ecology that's been looked at. No objection from the expert that we employ to advise us on those matters, so I won't go through that in any more detail. In terms of the car parking, that's set out in the committee report. Ultimately, the level of car parking, where that's appropriate, is for the district council to assess. But if we're saying that the level of car parking is deficient, that has to result in some problem. It's not enough to say it's two spaces short, 4 spaces short, whatever it might be, and therefore that's a reason to resist the application. It has to result in some planning harm, whether that is highway safety issues or displacement parking. And as we've said, in this particular site, because of the parking controls that exist, then there won't be displacement parking within the site. It's a very low speed environment, as members will have seen who visited it. So there's no highway safety issue, and that's why there's no objection from the Highway Authority in respect of those issues. In relation to neighbour amenity, I mean, that's set out in the committee report, and the distances from the proposed dwelling or flats to the existing dwellings. The test is set out in the policy DP 26 in the district plan is whether there's significant harm caused, and that is quite a high bar. So simply being able to see a development from the front elevation of the properties on Bowden Way to the south, that in your officer's view, that's not equating to significant harm. I think it's our view that the proposed block is a sufficient distance so it won't be unneighbourly or overbearing. So that's the officer's view on the neighbour amenity issue. And I think, as various members have said, on these types of applications, it is a matter of balancing things up. And the report sets out the cons of the application in respect of loss of trees, the fact that it's slightly below the car parking standards. But then you've got to look at all the benefits of the proposal in terms of 10 units in a sustainable location. It will contribute to the 5-year land supply because, as members know, there's a need to keep delivering permission, so that's maintained. So it is a matter of not just looking at the cons, we have to look at the benefits as well. And in your officer's view, that the benefits do outweigh the cons here. It is relevant that planning permission was resolved to be granted by the planning committee. It was under a different planning policy background. It was the Mid Sussex local plan at the time. So the weight that can be attributed to that is ultimately a matter for the decision maker, so for the committee members. But it is a fact that the committee at that time did resolve to grant planning permission for a very similar development on this site, and the surrounds in terms of the development around haven't changed significantly. So that is also something to bear in mind when you're considering this in the round. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say, Chairman.
As always, wise words. Councillor Brown, you've not spoken yet.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of minor things that came out from the officers' run through the drawings. I noticed the cycle parking, which obviously mitigates against normally I'd expect it to be secure cycle parking, and I feel sure that's what it says in the district plan. Didn't look secure to me. I mean, the under provision of car parking places is a good thing in what is really quite a sustainable, almost town centre location, which I know quite well. I mean, but people aren't going to cycle if they haven't got a secure place to keep their bikes. So that was a question: is it secure? And the other thing is, you mentioned about balconies. Or is it right that all of the units the apartments are provided with balconies? Thank you.
Thank you. In response to that, all of the apartments will be provided with a balcony, and I'll just take members back to the plan. This is the secure cycle store that they have shown on the plan. Obviously, you can see that it has got an entrance door and it's secure on all sides. Also, as part of the conditions, condition 16 requires the details to be submitted and approved. So if you're concerned that this is not secure enough, we can make sure that the details provided do ensure that the cycle store is secure.
Yeah, I think there is a concern that from Councillor Brown that it's not secure, so I think we can make that as a condition should it go through. Councillor, you've both spoken, so I'm going to go to the ward councillor first. Councillor Kenny. No, you switch yourself off. Don't touch.
Right. Okay, thanks. Just a couple of very quick comments. One was to add to the Chairman's comments about, balance and balancing out the need for new housing and this proposal. I've had it said to me by residents from Askins Wood that they understand that it would be perfectly reasonable to develop the site, just not something on this scale. So that's a feeling that's echoed by the residents. This is not just to do justice to the residents. They're not just taking a NIMBY approach. They understand that it would be. And then just to quickly make a point about, in regard to what Steve said, it isn't just opposition. I think if you take a different judgment on some of the morphology of the buildings, I've taken a different perspective on policies DP26, E9 and H8. And I would say that the development has some problems in relation to those policies. So that's another reason for thinking about it. Okay, that's it.
Councillor Henwood.
Well, it's about renewable schemes, renewable energy schemes, any renewable energy scheme associated with this. And Shirley, not Shirley, Chairman,
My name's not Shirley.
we have several, Chairman, we have several policies, not only about renewable energy, we have several policies about maintaining green open space. I would have thought myself it would be possible to say that this is contrary to some of our district council policies as an objection.
Okay. Now, we don't allow the officers to dream up the reasons to refusal. It's the members of the committee have to dream up the reasons to refusal. I think, and I will be pushed, it is page 137, it is DP26, it's the 6th bullet point down. And you've got to read this in the negative. So if I would suggest it does cause significant harm to the amenities of the existing nearby residents, future occupants of new dwellings, including the account of the impact on privacy, outlook, daylight and sunlight, etc., etc., etc. Now, obviously, it is a fair distance away, so you can't argue the loss of sunlight. But what I could say is, I think it's an overdevelopment of the site. It's as simple as that. It's an overdevelopment of the site. And I think getting the vibes from the members of the committee, I think they don't have a problem, something going on this site. This is not the one we should be going with. So, is that acceptable?
Yeah, in terms of the planning judgment as to whether there is significant harm to the neighbouring residents, ultimately that's a matter for the members of the planning committee as the decision maker. I think as officers we would just want to be clear, so we can understand which particular properties the concern is about. Is it both the houses to the north and the south of the site? Is it a particular house where the distance is, where you've almost got the pinch points? It's just so that we're clear, because as members know, if a planning application is refused, the applicants do have the right to lodge an appeal, and we would have to defend each reason for refusal. So we'd need to be very clear about what it is that the concern was, so that we can do that were it to go to an appeal.
Personally, you're the one who's going to be doing this, Councillor Kenny, because it's I would suggest it's the left-hand block more than the right-hand block, but you're the one who's going to be putting the sheer size. I would go along the lines, the sheer size bulk is out of keeping with the area. That's where I would suggest you should be heading. So that is potentially bullet point 3 as well. Creates a sense of place for addressing the character and scale of the surrounding buildings. I just think it overwhelms.
And also E9 following on very shortly, as I said, and H8. So both, they all make references to scale. They all make references to scale. And if I've got the mic at the moment, I would say it applies equally
to both of them.
To both of them. And if you wanted some specific guidance, team, it's literally the height is the key issue which makes the difference. I would assert. Now, I'm not saying that on the back of any detailed analysis, but that's the direction I would point you in which hasn't really come out in any of the diagrams that we've seen. It's implied when you see some of these sections that run across the way the land falls, but you know, simply saying, for example, as it does in one stage, in one part of the report, that the house on lower ground is at the same site as the house on higher ground, but that means that it's having a much more significant impact on the environment, and that reaches its apex for the residents on Bowden Way. So
you
I
would
would say
suggest
it's height.
3 stories is too much, two stories is more acceptable.
I would have thought that. And then all of the landscaping measures will be far more effective.
Yeah, that's the neighbourhood plan, so the district plan test about neighbour amenity, yeah.
It is contrary to then, what you're suggesting is contrary to DP 26, and that's far stronger than a neighbourhood plan, as your Councillor Hitchcock knows, alongside him, beside you. So I would suggest it is the sheer size of bulk is out of keeping with the area that it's in. Councillor Hitchcock, would you like to second that? Because I think Councillor Kenny's going to propose
Just before I do, can I just say that the key word on this is significant. Is it significant harm? I think it is, because of the height of the building. Thank you.
I think also if you do take a layer off, then you overcome the parking problems, and therefore less green space is going to be taken up. Now, obviously the viability, but we're not here to judge viability, we're here to judge the scheme we've got in front of us. So are you proposing to refuse it under the grounds of DP 26, the sheer size, bulk and height is out of keeping?
I am. Thank you for making that.
I thought I might have to. First time you've heard it. And Councillor Hitchcock, are you going to second that? Well, we do have a proposal and we do have a seconder. Does anybody else wish to speak? So, Councillor Cherry.
A small point. The proposal mentions a regenerative woodland scheme if some of this ancient woodland is destroyed, unfortunately. Who is responsible for the long-term maintenance of this? Because obviously...
It's the people who own the land. We don't own that land. We own the land the other side, Askins Wood is the other side, which leads to the back bottom of Hurst Farm. That is maintained by our estates team. No, it's not. It's maintained by our Mr. Anderton's team, ID Verdi and his bunch do all the maintenance of that. It's down to the actual landowner.
Right,
I mean, there are good things about it. They wanted to remove some of the hard standing, which is good. We're going to lose a little bit of whatever scheme we have, we will lose a little bit of ancient woodland for them to access the properties. It's acceptable. But when you take in the realms of the trees, the parking, shrink down the size of the buildings, it suddenly tilts the whole balance towards a development as opposed to where it is now, it's tilting either way. And the officers went that way, and Councillor Kenny went that way, and so did Councillor Hitchcock, said, well, I don't think this is the right idea. So that's where it goes.
It's just that I'm generally concerned that, you know, when trees are destroyed and then they're replanted somewhere else, which obviously we're going to come up against a lot after November, the important thing is the maintenance of these new hedgerows, new trees, because unless, and particularly with our particular climate now, very dry stages, summers and stuff, these areas need to be maintained for possibly 5 years of watering, constant watering.
We do have a standard condition that if anything gets planted, it is 5 years. So that's a standard condition, but obviously we're going to be moving beyond that under BNG, biodiversity net gain. Therefore, that has to be maintained for, as we heard, for 30 years.
30 years, yeah.
Now,
And how is this policed? You know, how do we ensure that this is actually happening? What safeguards are being put into this? You know, I mean, it looks good on paper, but in the real world, is this happening? Because I've often seen, you know, newly planted trees, after 2 years, they're dead because they haven't been looked after.
I think that was a case somebody brought up at the training session that we had about that. And it's a very valid question. But if they're going to offset, they have to maintain the B&Gs. They have to do it. Otherwise, they're in breach of the Section 106.
Yeah, so we need to be on it.
Yeah, we will do. Right, can you just switch off? Thank you. Proposer? Seconder to refuse the application under DP 26. I would be a little bit reluctant to add in the town council's one, purely because DP 26 is the overarching, that is the main district plan policy. Okay, right, so we have a proposal over a second. Can we go to the vote? Green, if you're going to refuse it. Red, you're not. Yellow, you are abstaining. Okay, we have a result. We have 8 in favour of refusing this application, 3 in support of the application, of not to refuse, and 1 abstain. So this application has been refused. Thank you. We'll do a quick changeover now, and you're ready now. MSDC are the applicants, and so this is down to you, Susan. Now you're ready.
Ready now.
Don't touch it.
Leave the red one.
You need red.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Red is go, green is not. I'm confused and I know.
Sorry, Chair. Right, as you said, the application is being reported to the Planning Committee as the applicant is Mid Sussex District Council. So the application seeks to vary condition 2, which was attached to a 1997 planning permission on the site. And that currently restricts the occupants of the 5 flats to those with learning difficulties and includes staff accommodation ancillary to the use. And the variation is sought in order to allow the site to be used as temporary accommodation for those who are homeless. The condition currently states that the flat shall not be occupied otherwise than by persons with learning difficulties or by a carer or warden ancillary to the approved use. And planning consent is now being sought to vary the condition to state the following: the flat shall not be occupied otherwise than by homeless persons in need of temporary accommodation. So this first slide just shows you the location of the property. This is Annandale here.
And as I said, it's subdivided at the moment. This is just a larger, more detailed version of the site plan. So, as I say, at the moment, it's divided into 5 flats with a substantial rear garden and is located on the south side of Broad Street. To the east, it is bordered by the approach to Warden Park School, and to the west and south are residential properties with Warden Court rear gardens backing onto the site. The site boundary consists of a small brick wall to the front and close-boarded timber fencing to the side, and then the rear garden is enclosed by a high mature hedging with a driveway onto the western side of the property. So this next slide just shows some photographs of the site from the front, and that is the access that takes you to Warden Park School, and that's just a view of the rear garden, and you can see the mature hedging. So as set out in the report, the main issue is the impact on residential amenity and the nearby secondary school, and there have been objections received from residents and one from the school itself regarding safeguarding issues. So it's important to note that the property would be managed by officers of Mid Sussex District Council, and the residents would not require 24-hour supervision, as more complex cases would be put in alternative accommodation, such as sheltered or supported living accommodation. The residents would not be registered one offenders or former rough sleepers, and they would be required to sign a residency or tenancy agreement, which would require certain behaviour to be adhered to. And if these rules were broken, then the council could investigate, and if necessary, the resident could be evicted. So officers consider that in view of the criteria that would be used to decide who would be housed in the property, there should not be any significant harm to residential amenity, and that there are measures in place to monitor residents' behaviour and to remove them from the property if necessary. And finally, just to note, there are additional benefits from having council-owned temporary housing accommodation, both for the residents who receive a better outcome and can be more efficiently managed, and also for the council itself, who has to meet its statutory duty to secure accommodation for homeless households, and it would then not have to rely as much on what is normally extremely expensive nightly paid accommodation. So the recommendation is therefore approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susan. We do have 2 speakers. Simon Jones from Mid Sussex District Council. If you'd like to come to where Terry is.
Good afternoon, members. I'm the Assistant Director for Digital and People Services. The Council has a statutory obligation to prevent homelessness and a responsibility in law to provide value for money. Nightly paid accommodation, which includes B&Bs, provides poor outcomes for those at risk of homelessness. Owning temporary accommodation instead saves the Council money and provides the best choice for those at risk of homelessness to find long-term settled accommodation by keeping families together and allowing people to draw from their support network right when they need it most. Housing would be used for people from the community at risk of homelessness, for example, people struggling with the cost of increased rents and increased mortgage payments, people with children in local schools, and people with families in the local community. This council would not use this accommodation to house people with extremely complex needs, but we already use specialist services that provide this support elsewhere. The council and its network of partnership organisations will support those we house here, not only with securing settled accommodation, but also with adjusting to living in temporary housing. We take our responsibilities seriously, and we have robust, tried and tested practices in place to support people who struggle and for resolving matters where tenants do not abide by the agreements we put in place. We have around 20 placements in nightly paid accommodation, and as seen nationally, this is not only expensive, but it's poorly suited to residents' needs. The availability of such accommodation means placements are usually out of the district, removing people from their support networks, their families, and in some cases their employment. They often end up staying longer in temporary accommodation, as each of these complications adds difficulty for people already in difficult circumstances. So ultimately, this further increases costs. This is a great opportunity for the council to further safeguard the well-being of people at risk from homelessness, provide the best chance for them to find long-term settled accommodation, and keep families and communities together and make savings.
Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Rebecca Hode and I'm an Associate Planner at ECE Planning. This application is for the change of use of the building to house people at risk of homelessness and in need of temporary accommodation. Members will be aware that the Council has a statutory duty to accommodate members of the community who are considered to be homeless. Annually, around 400 people require homeless accommodation in the Mid Sussex District. At the current time, the Council has 74 people in some kind of temporary accommodation with access to only 44 temporary accommodation units. This is clearly a clear need for such a facility, given the lack of local supply of bespoke accommodation. We acknowledge concerns raised by neighbours and the school about the vulnerabilities of those occupying this facility. Members will be aware that people can become homeless for a variety of reasons, such as family breakdown, lack of family support, or losing paid employment. We would reiterate that the building will be a well-managed and essential community facility, providing accommodation for the least vulnerable residents or complex cases who require temporary accommodation in Mid Sussex. In this respect, residents are capable of living completely independently. To be clear, this isn't a sheltered form of accommodation catering for extremely vulnerable residents. New residents would, however, be well supported by the Mid Sussex Temporary Accommodation Management Officer and other well-trained professionals who would regularly visit the accommodation to ensure residents are supported. Lastly, we would note that there is a positive letter of support from the Housing Officer which acknowledges the importance of the scheme in addressing a known housing need in the district. I hope therefore that you will uphold your officer's recommendation of approval and grant consent for this scheme. Thank you.
This is one of Mid Sussex success stories. This is keeping people within Mid Sussex when they're being made homeless for no fault of their own. This is, as you just heard from both of our speakers, it used to cost this district council an awful lot of money, sending them to outside the district and sometimes even outside the southeast. So that's in the rare occasions that we couldn't find accommodation for them. And I do think that going through the letters, I think they've misconstrued what this removing of condition 2 is. I think they think this is condition 2. It's the removal of the old condition 2. So I do think this is a good idea. I've spoken to one of the local board councillors, and those who were on the training session might have heard me speaking to him, and he fully supports this scheme. It's a very, very good idea. And who knows, it might be somebody who goes to Walden Park School, haven't got very far to walk them, which we hope it doesn't happen. John, Councillor Jabal.
Thank you very much indeed. A couple of things. First of all, the head teacher of the academy next door has stated some concerns.
Where's the CEO?
Yeah, CEO, sorry.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. I'd like to be assured that we've sort of addressed that properly. The other thing is, I can't seem to find how many people would be there. Now, I know that a relative has recently, the other side of the country somewhere, has recently had a house of multiple occupancy brought alongside them, and it's caused a number of problems. So the sort of thing that I wanted to know was to make sure that it was properly going to be supervised at all times, and just how many people would be there, please, if I may. Thank you.
Other side. That's it.
Yeah, just to answer, it does say on page 197, it would be for 5, because there's only 5 flats there, so each person would live in their own independent flat, so it wouldn't be like a hostel with shared facilities. They would live independently in the flats. So we're just talking about 5 people. Yeah, there's 5 flats there at the moment, but one of those flats is used by a carer, but this would be 5 people. And they wouldn't have 24-hour access, as I said in the report. That's because of the nature of the people that would be there. They wouldn't actually require that, and if they did, they'd be in another type of accommodation. Yeah.
Councillor Henwood.
I think, did I read anywhere, did I read in the report anywhere where Turning Tides would be around to help anybody who might need assistance, Turning Tides? Turning Tides, you don't know them, the organisation?
No, that's not in that department. Turning Tides is from the housing department. They deal with homeless people.
Okay, this is planning.
But this is, when you say homeless people, these are people who normally live on the streets. That's what Turning Tides normally get used for. These are people where husband and wife break up. One stays in the old family home and the other one has to move out.
Gary, I'm all in favour of this. I support it fully. I think it, and in fact, I'm quite interested because I used to be a prison visitor, and they're prisoners, people who leave prison, maybe for financial default or whatever. There, to find a place for them to go is very difficult. So.
Well, they normally go into a hostel.
But that's
on
the
way
worst
through.
place. You mix with the worst.
Yes.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
fully support this application.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Hitchcock.
I think we ought to support Simon and his team. I think they do a fantastic job.
Okay. Councillor Cherry.
Yes, well, whilst I support this, I'm slightly concerned about people with learning difficulties which are currently housed in this.
They're not there now.
Are they not there?
No. We're buying it, if I get this right, just nod, don't say anything. We're buying this off Clarion. Clarion have that responsibility. It's surplus to their requirements. So we're taking the opportunity as District Council, using our funds that we have, our new homes bonus and stuff like that, to purchase this site so that we could, the best thing for it is nobody goes in there because they're all in their own homes. But this is a fallback should they do. So no, we will not be doing it, and we're not depriving anybody with learning. It's surplus to requirements for Clarion. So therefore, we took the opportunity, which we do all the time, Simon and his team, look at all these that come up, and we put a bid in, whether they agree with it or they don't, or they decide they want to go market. This is what it's a success story. This is a Mid Sussex District Council success story, and we are just carrying that on.
Thank you.
So, can I have a proposer? Councillor Hitchcock? Can I have a seconder? Councillor Sweatman? Can we vote in the normal way? Green if you agree with the removal of this condition 2. Red if you don't. Yellow if you... Wrong one. We have a unanimous removal of condition 2. Thank you very much. And I will close the meeting at 6:12. Can members stay in place until the recording is finished? Difficult meeting, quite complicated, of all three. You did really well. Thank you.